The storm came in on a low growl, dragging a slick black curtain over the tarmac until the runway lights floated like faraway lanterns on a dark river. Maya Alvarez, a night shift cleaner with a sore back and cheap sneakers that squeaked when they were wet, jogged across the service lane with a plush gray rabbit in her fist. "Wait," she shouted, breath fogging in the cold. A flight attendant in a navy trench turned too late. The Gulfstream's door was already closing. Hydraulic hush swallowing her voice, Maya reached the bottom of the stairs just as the wind slapped rain against her cheeks. The rabbit was small, its stitched eyes lopsided, like it knew how to worry. She didn't think. She tucked under the lowering door with a desperate slide and landed on her knees inside the cabin. Heart sprinting, the world suddenly drowned in the hush of money-pale leather, soft carpeting, a bar gleaming under muted gold light. "Stop." A voice snapped from the shadowed aisle, cool, arctic. The kind of voice that made men move and planes take off. "Who are you?" Maya scrambled up, clutching the toy like a surrender flag. The owner of the voice stepped into the light tall, hard lines in a black suit, a face carved in winter Silas Greystone, the Silas Greystone. The name everyone spit with awe or envy or both. Billionaire, dealmaker, destroyer of weaker men. Up close, he was colder than he looked on magazine covers, cheekbones sharp as verdicts, eyes a storm-colored gray that didn't blink. Someone left this on the lounge sofa," she said, winded. "A baby was crying. I thought I'm sorry. The plane shuddered, turning from the stand. Outside, the sky cracked white and swallowed the sound. The door sealed with a final kiss. There was no just anything anymore. She was on the wrong jet, in a thunderstorm with the wrong man, only he wasn't wrong. He was unavoidable, the gravity of a world that had never bothered to notice her unless she was invisible. Silas lifted a hand and the attendant stilled. He looked at the rabbit, then past Maya, toward the back of the cabin, where a soft whimper became a thin, startled wail. The sound pierced the gold quiet like a needle. "Bring her forward," he said, voice lower now, and the attendant hurried toward a bassinet fixed at the rear bulkhead. A twin wail answered the first two threads of need tightening, bright and insistent. Maya's eyes widened. Twins. She glanced at Silas and saw, for the briefest fracturing second, something flicker across the hard glass of his composure. A crack of exhaustion. Fear. No, men like him didn't fear, but the whales didn't care about men like him. They had no interest in power, only warmth, arms that knew how to sway. "Miss Alvarez," the attendant read from her badge when she returned, a question flitting across her face. "You can't be here." "I know. I'm sorry." "I'll—" The plane lifted. Gravity pressed her into the carpet. One twin's cry climbed from alarm to panic. That breathless climb every mother on earth recognizes. A muscle jumped in Silas's jaw. He looked like a man at a boardroom table, choosing whether to cut 1,000 jobs. He looked like a man who had never been asked to rock a child in a storm. Maya's body moved before permission could be issued or denied. "May I?" she asked, and didn't wait. Because babies don't wait. She slid her arms under the squirming bundle the attendant offered and lifted the tiny weight, astonishingly heavy for being so light. The baby's cheeks were damp and petal soft. Her cry immediate and all-consuming. Maya tucked the rabbit into the crook of the second twin's bassinet and pressed the first against her chest. "Shh, mi vida," she whispered, Spanish falling from her tongue like a lullaby she'd learned before her own name. "Ya pasó, ya pasó." The thunder stepped closer. The cabin dipped. The second twin hiccuped an indignant mule. Maya rocked her hips, the way you do when you have nothing else to give but rhythm. She hummed something half-remembered, a folk melody her mother had braided into her hair on long, hungry nights, night rivers and little boats, yellow moons that were really just street lamps broken by rain. The first twin's sobs softened to whimpers. The second quieted, blinking with the solemn question of new people, "Can I trust you?" Maya breathed. The storm kept roaring. Silas watched. He was close enough now that she could see the bright edge of his cufflink, the faint shadow under his eyes that expensive concealer hadn't erased. He didn't look like a monster, not exactly. He looked like a man who had made a kingdom out of control and was terrified by the one thing he couldn't negotiate with need. "What are their names?" she asked softly, not to the attendants or the ring of wealth that was already tightening around her, but to him. His mouth tugged like he'd forgotten how to use it except for orders. "Noah," he said, glancing at the boy, who had gone back to sleep with the rabbit under his fist. "And Nia." Maya smiled down at Nia. "Hola, Nia," she whispered. "Tu mandas. You're the boss." Nia's small hand found the chain at Maya's throat, a cheap gold coin with a saint on it, worn smooth by worry. Her grip was ridiculous, a flower holding the wind. The jet punched through a column of rain and into a pocket of stillness. The engines settled to a steady hush. Maya breathed again and realized everyone else was holding their breath, too, like a meeting that hadn't yet decided whether to explode or applaud. Silas broke the silence. "We will speak when we land," he said, voice like a locked door. "For now, just keep her quiet." Maya nodded, because that was something she could do. The wealthy had names for everything they purchased: exclusivity, privacy, discretion. The poor had only verbs: keep, hold, try. She rocked the baby and stared out into the wet black where the world had disappeared. She had gotten on the wrong jet. Maybe that was the only kind she'd ever been offered. Wrong doors that led to rooms with no exits, no mercy. Naya's breath hitched, then settled. The rabbit-stitched eyes watched with patient worry. Somewhere below, the city flattened into a grid of tired light, and the river braided itself into the storm, up here, in this hush. Maya felt her life tilt, subtle but unmistakable, as if the plane had banked toward a future she hadn't chosen and couldn't yet name. Silas Greystone stayed standing, immovable as a column, a man who had never begged. He didn't know it yet, neither did she, but the moment the baby's fist tightened around her necklace, the story had already decided he would not be able to let her go. Morning peeled back the night with a pale gray light that made the clouds look like bruises. The jet kissed the runway in a gentle exhale. On the other side of the windows, Zurich's immaculate order runways like rules, glass like promise. Inside, the cabin smelled of cedar and sleep. Maya's spine ached in the sweet, familiar way of hours spent with a child on your chest. Naya had finally drifted off at some point between lightning and the quiet that follows a storm. Now she lay in the bassinet, her tiny mouth forming an O of dream. Noah clutched the rabbit like a lifeline. His dark hair was a fluff of feathers. "Coffee," the attendant murmured. She placed a porcelain cup in front of Maya before she realized what she was doing and startled, as if she'd served a stray cat at a white table restaurant. "I thank you," Maya said. Fingers wrapped around the heat like she could drink courage. She hadn't meant to fall asleep. She hadn't meant to be here at all. "Miss Alvarez," the locked door voice again. Silas stood with his jacket buttoned and his life back in its armor. The storm was gone from his eyes. The exhaustion was not. Maya set the cup down. "I know. I shouldn't have. I never meant to." Where do you work? He asked. She blinked. Terminal C, night cleaning. Sometimes day shift at the cafe when they need me. I was dropping off the rabbit to a family in the lounge. I thought this was their plane. You're a cleaner. He said it without contempt, merely as fact. It landed like a bruise anyway. I'm a mother, she said before she could stop herself. Cleaning is how I eat. Then, because she was stubborn, she added softly, and how my daughter does. Something changed at the mention of daughter, a flicker like a candle behind frosted glass. Silas angled his chin toward the bassinet. He stopped, the word father catching on unpracticed tongue. Their guardian. Maya watched his hands. They were strong hands with thin scars, the kind men get from expensive sports and glass that breaks when a deal doesn't. He cleared his throat. My sister, Lila, passed away last month. Complications. The last word was clean, clinical, like a boardroom spreadsheet. She had no partner. I'm the only family left. I'm sorry, Maya said. She meant it. Grief is a country with only one language. They're beautiful. They are difficult. He looked at Nia as if she were a riddle with teeth. Noah will take a bottle. Mostly. Nia. He exhaled, a quiet admission of defeat. The night nurse quit yesterday. Maya's gaze touched the rabbit, the stitched eyes, the small miracle of a baby that sleeps even after storms. She knew the shape of nights like that, when the clock dissolves until it's only breath and fatigue, and a prayer that morning is kind. Do you live here? She asked, because his voice belonged to Steele and New York, not the tidy order of Switzerland. We're continuing on, he said. Meetings in Milan, a property in Lake Como, a deal in Rome that refuses to behave. His mouth tilted, not a smile, but its reluctant cousin. Then home, home. The word was a cold penthouse of glass slicing the sky above Manhattan. Maya didn't know that yet, but she could smell it on him. Money and altitude, a place where the windows were taller than her life. Her home was a basement apartment that flooded when it rained hard. The window there was a rectangle of street ankles and dogs. Where is your daughter? He asked. And it could have sounded like a trap, but did not. It sounded like a man trying to understand a woman who had rocked his niece through a storm without asking what it might cost her. With my neighbor, Senora Ruiz, Maya said. She's 80 if she's a day, and has a laugh that scares teenagers. Camila is 5. She likes strawberry yogurt, hates socks, and believes every pigeon is a messenger. She realized she was babbling and clamped a hand over her mouth, embarrassed by the flood of mother talk in a room that cost more than she would earn in 3 years. Silas's gaze did something strange, softened, then steadied. Camila, he repeated. He looked at Nia, then at Maya. Miss Alvarez, you boarded a private aircraft without authorization. There are consequences for that. I know, she said. The coffee turned bitter in her throat. I'll tell security. Whatever you... I can pay. I can't pay much. I don't want your money. He glanced at the twins like a problem smoldering on the horizon of his perfect day. I need your competency. Maya blinked. My what? You kept them calm, he said simply. 4 hours. She? He nodded at Nia. She hasn't slept longer than 20 minutes at a time since the nurse quit. And he broke off, as if the admission might fracture him. I have a plane to board in 2 hours in a meeting that will try to ruin 5 months of work. Now she saw it in him. The miserable under the steel, not self-pity, but a bone-deep loneliness. a man who had erected an empire around an empty room. She wondered what lived in that room. The ghost of a mother, a sister, the boy. Silas Greystone had been before. Cold became safer than warm. "What are you asking me to do?" she said carefully. "Come to Milan," he said. "For 2 days. Keep them alive." A beat. Then the corner of his mouth acknowledged the absurdity of the sentence. "Keep them comfortable." He slid a small black card from his wallet and placed it on the table. "You will be compensated 10 times what you earn in a week at the airport. You'll return to New York with us Sunday evening." Maya stared at the card like it might evaporate. 10 times. Sunday. She could pay Senora Ruiz, fix the leak under the sink, buy Camila shoes that didn't hurt, but her spine stiffened because there were other things besides money: dignity, safety, the fact that if you say yes to a man like him, you might never learn how to say no again. "And if I say no," she asked. His gaze didn't waver. "Then you'll disembark here. I'll handle the security issue." He said it without threat, but the world vibrated with it. Anyway, he had the power to make problems vanish, and people with them. Maya looked at Naya, at Noah's rabbit, at rain drying into crystals on the window. She thought about how it feels when a 5-year-old curls into you like a comma at 3 a.m. and the rent is due and the universe keeps asking you to be brave. She thought about the fact that she'd somehow ended up in a place where asking for help might sound like scheming. 2 days, she told herself. 2 days of milk and lullabies, not a lifetime, not a debt you couldn't pay. Sunday, she said, "I need to call Senora Ruiz. Tell her I'll be late." "Arrange. We'll make the calls," he said. "You'll be given a phone." He hesitated. "Thank you." It was so sincere, so unarmored, that the thanks startled her more than the money had. On the drive to the Zurich executive terminal, she caught glimpses of herself in the black glass. A woman in a borrowed cardigan the attendant had insisted she take, hair damp and pulled back, a saint's coin on a thrift store chain, a cleaner who rocked a billionaire's niece as if she were her own. And the billionaire, he was winter in a suit, haunted and precise. When their eyes met on the reflection's pane, a shiver ran soft as silk down Maya's spine. Lake Como looked like a postcard even in rain. And the villa they ferried to by car had the kind of staircases designed to be photographed, to make you feel like a secret. Maya carried Nia upstairs herself. No one stopped her. In the nursery, white and whisper. The nanny, black and unblinking in the corner, like a tiny midnight moon, that night, while the world outside sold diamonds and veal. Maya held 2 small humans who didn't care about anything but breath and warmth. She moved in the slow, ancient choreography, shared by women in palaces and tenement sway. Hum, kiss the damp temple. She thought of Camila, the shape her daughter made when asleep, a parenthesis curled around a dream. Downstairs, a man signed papers worth more than everything in Maya's life combined. Upstairs, a woman who earned $10 an hour kissed a baby's forehead and decided she wouldn't be ashamed for being good at something the world pretends is easy. They lived on separate floors, but the same night. And the storm. It wasn't over. It had only grown quiet enough for both of them to hear the next one coming. The first tabloid photo hit, while Milan was still yawning and awake, Silas exiting the villa with Maya behind him, Nia tucked against her shoulder, Noah's rabbit clipped in the crook of her elbow. The headline did not say, "Cleaner saves chaos night, babies sleep." It said, "Greystone debuts mystery, nanny in rain-soaked romance." Ridiculous, Silas muttered, when his chief of staff thrust the phone toward him. We were on our way to the pediatrician. Ridiculous cells, the man said. Your fiancé is on the line, fiancé Maya repeated from the nursery doorway, the word floating down like a feather that turns into a knife when it lands. Silas paused, looked at her. The tiniest flinch of regret passed through him. Vivienne, Laurent, he said. It's complicated. Of course it was. Things that belong in glass are always complicated. He took the call. Voice lowering. Sentences short as razor cuts. No. Unavoidable. A nurse quit. Yes, I'm managing it. No, it's not what it looks like. He listened, face smoothing into neutrality, the way you shut a door on a room full of fire. When he hung up, Maya pretended she hadn't heard the part where Vivienne had said, in a tone that could curdle cream, "Fix the optics." She pretended she hadn't noticed the way his shoulders tightened around the word father. The pediatrician's office was high-gloss kindness. Naya's weight was charted. Noah's ears checked. The rabbit disinfected to absurdity. Reflux. The doctor said gently, she needs smaller, more frequent feeds. Patience. Routine. She glanced at Maya the way women look at each other when men aren't watching and pressed a sample bottle into her hand. This helps. Back at the villa, chaos bloomed in new colors. A photographer lay in the hedges like a hunting cat. The head of household staff murmured apologies. The house manager informed Silas that the chef had quit because their toddler had measles, and please accept my resignation. Sir, power is a strange god. It can buy anything except enough hands to hold all the things that break at once. Maya tried to become smaller than she was, invisible but effective. She rock-walked the halls, sang the little river song, learned the way Nia liked to be held at dusk belly down, heart to palm. She learned that Noah loved ceiling fans and hated the sound of rain on glass. She learned Silas's footsteps, the way the floorboards spoke his name when he moved, how the whole house seemed to suck in its breath when he entered a room. That afternoon, he returned from meetings with an expression that meant a deal had bared its teeth and he had bitten first. The Rome acquisition is stalling, he said to his chief of staff, then noticed the curve of Maya's back, where she'd fallen asleep on the nursery sofa. Nia sprawled like a starfish on her chest, without thinking. He reached to adjust the blanket at the baby's heel. His fingers brushed Maya's wrist. She woke, eyes bright and prepared for need. Sorry, he said, another soft astonishment. Didn't mean to. It's okay. She smiled, sleep warm. I dream with one eye open. Mother's talent, he murmured, and something in his tone made her ask, gentle but reckless. Did your mother teach you that? Silas's eyes shuddered. No. There it was again, the empty room inside the empire. Maya wanted to ask what lived there. Instead, she asked, will you hold her while I run to the bathroom? Only a minute, she hesitated, then placed Naya into his arms with the reverence of a small ceremony. He took the baby like a man receiving a delicate contract. Naya blinked at him, serious as moonlight. Then, astonishingly, she smiled an unpracticed beam that made her mouth an apple slice. Silas exhaled as if he'd been underwater. He looked up, and the look he gave Maya when she returned was not the look of a man appraising an employee. It was the look of a person who had stumbled upon a warm room in winter and wasn't sure if he was allowed to stay. That was the afternoon Vivienne arrived. She swept into the villa with a fragrance that cost a car and a coat the exact color of expensive ice. Her beauty was immaculate, cheekbones like verdicts, lips like promises sealed in wax. "Darling," she said, air kissing Silas's cheek. She glanced at Naya, at the rabbit, at Maya, and arranged her smile into the shape of benevolence. And this must be the help. Maya felt herself compress, a shame she had learned at 15 and never quite unlearned. She stood. "I'll stay," Silas said quickly, too quickly, and something cool and predatory flickered in Vivian's eyes. "We needed someone competent in the interim." He added, "The agency is sending candidates for a permanent night nurse on Monday." Vivian's gaze slid over Maya, cataloging thrift store necklace, borrowed cardigan, the kind of hands that don't get manicures because there are groceries to buy. "How resourceful," she murmured, in the tone rich people use when they've decided to be kind in public, but cruel in private. She touched Nia's cheek with a fingertip. "She looks like you," she said to Silas, which was both biologically impossible and strategically flattering. They had a dinner that evening that required tuxedos and opinions. Silas went. Vivienne went. Reporters went where they were pointed. Maya stayed and learned the villa's midnight, the way the lake breathed, the way the nursery hummed with the electricity of things that watched over children cameras, monitors, saints who never sleep. Around Tuami, when the silence had the texture of velvet, Maya padded to the kitchen for water and found the house manager at the back door, arguing in a whisper with a man in a leather jacket. She stilled. The man turned. Her stomach fell through the floor. "Hola, Maya," he said, smiling with the mouth that used to kiss her and then learned to lie. Luis, he had been a boyfriend, once, the kind that smells like gasoline and decisions you regret, the kind who left when she told him she was pregnant, then showed up when he heard there might be money. "What are you doing here?" Maya whispered. "Looking for you," he said. "Heard you got yourself a rich friend. Thought maybe you'd want to share." The house manager made a helpless gesture, caught between payroll and pity. He wouldn't leave. She mouthed, mortified, "Get out." Maya told him, "Blood gone, cold, or I'll call security." "Security invited me," Luis said, and there it was, the copper taste of danger. "Said I should talk to Mr. Greystone tomorrow. Said there might be opportunities." He left a card, grease-smudged, with a phone number that rang trouble. Maya stood very still after he had gone and learned a new truth about power. It doesn't only attract money. It attracts everything that sniffs the scent of it. Paparazzi, old ghosts, men who owe and think you're the one who should pay. She didn't sleep much. After that, in the morning, the twins had a good hour, warm light on their faces, coos like bubbles. Maya let herself feel it joy that had nothing to do with her name written neatly on a schedule, or zeros she'd never see, just a baby's open-mouthed laugh and the miracle of being answered. When she brought them down to the sunroom, she found Silas with a newspaper folded so sharply it could cut. His eyes were harder than they had been the night before. "Why is there a man on the gate footage asking for you?" Maya told him the truth. "Because lies ferment." She kept her voice steady. "He's no one. I'll make sure he stays that way." Silas's jaw ticked. He didn't like things he couldn't control, and he especially didn't like the suggestion that something from Maya's world could stain his. "I'll handle it," he said. "I can handle it," she replied. Heat rising. "I've been handling men like that since I was 16. They stared at each other across a small universe, money and pride, need and habit. The babies gurgled, unaware of borders. Silas looked away first. "We leave for Rome at noon. Be ready." "Ready," Maya said, but in her chest. An old fear had woken and put on its boots. Rome wrapped itself in honeyed light and the smell of espresso. The hotel was a palace, pretending to be a place to sleep. Maya watched the twins discover gold ceiling plaster and laughed, a sound so bright that even the concierge smiled. She almost believed the worst was behind them until the elevator doors opened and revealed Vivian, standing with a man in a navy suit whose eyes were too interested in everything. "This is Mr. Harrow," she said breezily. "Public relations, here to make our little situation go away. Good morning to you, too," Maya said, but softly, because Nia was nodding toward a nap. Harrow's smile saw through people and shook hands with the calculation behind them. "Ms. Alvarez," he said, as if they were already on a first-name basis because he had told the internet they were. "You've been a tremendous help at a delicate time. We appreciate discretion." There it was, hammered thin, the word that means silence bought with money. "I wasn't planning to write a memoir," Maya replied. She aimed for lightness and hit something else, the edge of hurt. Harrow cleared his throat and shifted a folder onto the marble console. "We have a standard agreement." He slid it toward her. "Non-disclosure, compensation commensurate with not here," Silas said. And the way he said it made the room colder. Not in front of them. Harrow tucked the paper away. Vivian, who had watched the exchange like a woman shopping, turned to Maya with a smile that could cut your finger. "I'm glad we agree on boundaries," she said. Maya didn't trust herself to speak. She kept moving diapers, bottles, burp cloths, because if her hands were busy, maybe her tongue wouldn't make enemies she couldn't afford. In the afternoon, while the baby slept, Silas stepped onto the balcony with his phone. The light made him less marble, more man. He spoke rapidly in Italian to a person who didn't give easily, and then switched to English to bark at someone in New York. He hung up with a sound like a door slamming in the distance and leaned both hands on the cold stone. "My father's fixer used to say, deals are only made out of two ingredients," he said without turning, "fear and greed. Tell a man which one he's cooking with, and you can save yourself a lot of time." "Which are you cooking with?" Maya asked from the threshold, surprised to find herself smiling. He looked back. The answer surprised both of them. Hope. The word was so naked in his mouth that Maya almost looked away. "Dangerous ingredient," she said. "The most." He agreed. The moment held not romantic, not yet, but shaped like the place where romance might one day build a home. It collapsed an hour later when security escorted a reporter out of the lobby and a photo surfaced of Maya kissing a man outside a bodega. "Who the hell is this?" Harrow demanded, slapping the printout onto a table as if slapping down a charge in court. Maya's stomach fell. The photo was old, but the pattern on the awning was very specific, and the date stamp did not care about context. Luis had texted last night. She hadn't replied. The internet didn't care about timelines, about fear, about how a girl becomes a mother alone. "That is none of your business," she said, and the tremor in her voice was pure rage. "It is if it affects the children," Vivian said silkily. "Optics. Darling, optics." Maya laughed. A sharp, small sound. "You mean how it looks for a billionaire to need help from someone like me?" The baby stirred, as if to say, "In this." Silas lifted a hand, eyes on Maya, and for once his expression was not winter. It was weather that might change. "Enough," he said to the room. "Ms. Alvarez is here because I asked her to be. If you have an opinion, save it for your bonuses." The meeting disbanded in a gust of offended competence, in the thick quiet that followed. Maya let her shoulders slump. They think I want something. He considered that. Do you? Her gaze met his, steady, unflinching, only to be paid what you promised and to get home to my daughter without being chased by ghosts I already outran once. He nodded, something like respect warm in his eyes. You will be. You will. They almost made it through Rome without another storm. Then, at the hotel entrance that evening, she saw him, Luis. He had shaved and borrowed a blazer. He looked like an apology, and she knew better than to trust that costume. I don't want to talk to you, she said, stepping backward, a movement that placed her between him and the stroller the twins dozed in. 10 minutes, he said, voice low, outside, man to man. He added with a smirk at Silas, who had materialized at her shoulder. She doesn't meet men alone, Silas said, and the simplicity of the sentence made something inside Maya ease by a fraction. Luis's eyes glittered. Easy to be noble when you're rich. You think money gives you the right to keep what isn't yours. Nothing here is yours, Silas said softly, which is how men speak when they are very sure. You think Luis laughed. Ask your security head how he found me. Ask your father. If you remember which penthouse he drinks in this month. A thin crack skittered across the perfect surface of the evening. What does my father have to do with this? Silas asked, too calm. Luis shrugged. Maybe he doesn't like the idea of some airport girl playing house with his legacy. Maybe some people pay good money to remind you where you came from. He sauntered off, satisfied with the ruin he'd left. Silas's face had gone a beautiful, terrifying stillness. He called his head of security. The man arrived sweating, his tie askew. He tried to lie. He failed. The truth took its shape. He had been feeding information to an intermediary who, under pressure, connected to Silas's estranged father, a man who loved whiskey and gossip more than any child he'd made, a man who wanted his son's life tidy, photogenic, business first, a man who paid small-time devils like Luis to disrupt anything that looked like love. Silas fired the security chief on the spot. He did it with the grace of a guillotine, swift, clean, final. Then he sat down in a chair as if the strings that hold men upright had been cut. Maya did what women do when kings collapse. She put a hand on his shoulder. Then both. Breathe, she said. In, out. He obeyed. The most frightening thing about that moment was not that he listened. It was how grateful he looked for the instruction. Why are you helping me? He asked after a minute. Voice ragged. Because babies sleep better when the house is steady, she said. It was true and not the whole truth. The other part was quieter. Because there is a person under all your marble. Because you said hope like it was a word you just found in a book and wanted to sound out with someone. When they flew back to New York the next day, the air was heavy with summer thunder and unresolved things. The jet lifted through clouds that looked like bruised peaches. Maya strapped Nia into the bassinet, kissed Noah's forehead, and stared at the skyline needle stitching itself on the horizon. She had been gone 4 days. Her life waited in a basement with a leak under the sink and a saint's medal on the nightstand. But there was a new thread now, thin but unbreakable, running from the nursery on the jet to a heart that had been too cold for too long. You don't always get to choose the doors that change you. Sometimes the wrong jet is the only way home. The storm over Manhattan arrived hot and sudden, the kind that turns streets into mirrors and leaves the air tasting like copper. The elevator in Silas's building hummed up the spine of glass to the 68th floor and opened onto a world cut from money, slate and silk, art that looked like a quiet argument. Welcome home. the housekeeper said, with the professional warmth of someone who never lets weather inside. The nursery was a hush of white, with windows like movie screens. The city threw 100,000 tiny lights at the glass and watched to see which ones the babies would catch. They settled. For an hour, it was almost easy. Two small chests rising and falling. Maya's hands learning the cadence of this new room. Silas in the hallway, arguing softly with a man who held the fate of a shipping conglomerate in his distant, scratchy voice. At 9, the fire alarm hiccuped and died. At 9:02, the power flickered. At 9:03, lightning cracked so fiercely that the sky went white, and the building shuddered in outrage. Nia woke with a cry that wasn't her usual indignant mew. It was wet at the edges, thinner, a reed catching in wind. Maya scooped her up. The baby was warm, too warm. Her skin felt tight. Heat pooled under fine hair. Fever. Yes, but not just fever. A wrongness that grabbed Maya by the base of her spine and shook. Silas, she called, and he was there in the doorway before she'd finished the second syllable. She saw his face change when he saw hers. Money makes you good at reading numbers. Babies make you good at reading fear. What is it? She's burning, Maya said. Already flipping open the little pharmacy that travels with infants. She found the thermometer. It beeped high. 104. The building's lights fluttered again. Somewhere below them, a transformer groaned like a wounded thing. Pediatrician, Silas said. Already dialing. Ambulance, Maya said, because she had learned the sound of urgent too many times to waste it. He looked up, met her eyes, and for once didn't argue. Ambulance. The housekeeper moved like a pro bag. Blanket, elevator key. The storm threw itself at the glass again, furious that anyone would dare breathe without its permission. The elevator shuddered, then stopped. Silas hit the emergency button. The intercom spat static, and a voice that would have been soothing if it weren't 1,000 feet away. We're experiencing a brief outage. Backup generators are coming online. Please remain in. Is there a service stair? Maya asked. 2, the housekeeper said, pale. Silas looked at the baby, at the elevator's unhelpful smirk. He didn't like walking when the world owed him an escalator, but he didn't hesitate. Stairs, he said. They ran. The 68th floor bled into the 67th, the 66th into a place where numbers didn't matter. Maya moved like a machine, built for love, balanced. Sure, the baby's head supported even as her feet flew. Silas carried Noah's stroller awkwardly and then abandoned it, lifting his nephew to his chest and tucking the rabbit into his jacket pocket with a tenderness that hurt to watch. Rain blew through a door someone had propped open with a trash bin. It slicked the stairs, made the metal railing a cold snake in Maya's palm. Her breath came in bursts. Nia's cry thinned. Talk to her, Maya said. Because silence is a cliff. Tell her something true. Silas started to say, it's okay. Because that is what adults say to children and also to themselves when it is not. He stopped. Nia, he said softly, voice frayed. I'm bad at this, but I'm trying. I want to be better than I was. Maya felt something inside her break open. Good, she said, which was not a word for comfort, but it was honest. And sometimes honesty is the only raft. On the 44th floor landing, a man in a baseball cap blocked the door with a bag of takeout and a scowl that said, "Not my circus." He turned when he saw Maya. His eyes went mean, in a way she recognized with a nausea that felt like memory. Luis, She breathed. He smiled. Power's out. Thought I'd take the stairs like a citizen. His gaze dipped to the baby, then to Silas. He licked his teeth. Nice family you've built. Be a shame if the wrong story got told. Move, Silas said, and it should have sounded like an order issued from a floor where men sign treaties. It sounded like a prayer. Luis didn't move. Maybe I should hold her, he said. Ugly. For the photo. Maya's fingers went white where they held the child. Touch her and I will kill you, she said, so quietly that the words scraped. He believed her. Monsters know when a mother means it. He stepped aside with a bow so mocking it made something black flood Silas's expression. They ran again. 38, 35. Nia's cry fell to a low, frightening mule. Call 911 again. Maya said, tell them we're on the stairs. East Tower. His voice shook with control. They're sending a unit. Traffic is... I don't need traffic. Maya snapped. Not at him. I need air. On the 31st floor, a maintenance door banged open, and a man with a tool belt shouted, this way. He smelled like work and mercy. He led them through a gray warren of ducts and light that stuttered and came back to life one strobe at a time. The lobby was chaos, concierges on phones, rain in the revolving doors, police radios cracking. The EMTs made a lane appear where there had been none. Fever. Maya said, words falling like cards in a trick. 104. Lethargy. Decreased wet diapers. Reflux history. Started 90 minutes ago. Escalated 20. She's warm to the fontanelle and breathing shallow. Mom, the EMT asked, automatically, working even as she spoke. Maya opened her mouth, closed it, looked at Silas. Guardian, he said, voice breaking on the word. Then, to the EMT, she's hers. He stopped, gesturing to Maya, helpless to explain how this woman had become the safest place in a room full of professionals. They loaded Nia into the ambulance. Maya climbed in without asking, as if she always rode in vehicles that smell like cleaning fluid and adrenaline. Silas started to follow. An officer put a hand on his chest. We need one of you to stay with the boy. Noah's rabbit peered from Silas's pocket, eyes stitched in that permanent worried tilt. Maya looked out the ambulance's open doors and saw it plain and impossible, the billionaire who had built walls out of glass, and silent stood in the rain, cradling a child, and shook. Silas, she called. He looked up and found her face in the storm. She held his gaze, the way you hold a hand. We'll meet you there. Breathe. The door shut. Siren stitched a crooked line through the city. Needle flashing red and blue. Nia's breath hitched, then gasped. The EMT looked up sharply. She's struggling. Bag, Maya said. Her training was old and partially unfinished classes she had loved until life had asked her to trade them in for food and a child, but the body remembers what the brain was forced to forget. Angle her, she demonstrated, gentle but precise. The EMT did. The oxygen hissed. Naya's little chest fluttered like a trapped bird, then found a rhythm. At the hospital, fluorescent light flattened everything into urgency. Nurses moved like water. A doctor with kind eyes and fast hands said bronchiolitis and admit and thank you. You did exactly right. The words slid through Maya, loosening knots she'd tied around her heart so tightly it ached when they let go. Silas arrived carrying Noah and the rabbit, hair plastered to his forehead, suit ruined by rain. He looked at Maya like a man looks at dawn after a night he thought might kill him. Is she? She's stable, Maya said, and didn't realize she was crying until the salt hit her lips. They're keeping her to watch her oxygen. He exhaled so hard it bent him. He put Noah in her arms as if that were the only thing that could hold him upright. He braced his forearms on the wall and bowed his head the way men do in churches when they don't know the prayers, only the wanting in the chair by the crib. He spoke without lifting his face. I used to think love was a kind of leverage, he said hoarsely. A negotiation. Give, get. I thought, he swallowed. I thought if I never needed anyone, no one could leave me. Maya laid her hand on his back. It felt like placing a palm on a horse's flank, heat and muscle, strength and tremble. And now she asked, now I need you, he said, broken and true, and I don't know how to not be terrified by that. The machines clicked and hummed. Nia slept with a small frown, as if scolding the world for being so loud. In the hallway, someone laughed the way exhausted people do when relief finds them. Maya wiped her cheek with her wrist and laughed. Two, one shaky sound that tasted of salt and something like sunlight. You learn, she said, every day. Vivian arrived an hour later, hair perfect, face composed in a concern that couldn't quite hide its investment in optics. I can take over, she said. You must rest. Silas, you look... She swallowed adjectives. Silas straightened. He was still wet and ruined, but his eyes were clear. No, he said gently. Go home. Vivian, she stared, then smiled in the way people do when they've decided to pretend it was their idea. Of course, we'll talk tomorrow. They would not the way she thought. Empires fall quietly at first, a decision made in a hospital hallway, a hand not taken. Later, when headlines try to find beginnings, they'll miss the small, precise moment on Sant when a man said no and meant it. When everyone had gone, and the storm outside exhausted itself against the glass, Silas curled in the hospital chair and slept like a boy. Mouth slack, eyelashes dark and wet. Maya tipped her head back and watched the ceiling until it blurred. She thought about fear and hope, about wrong doors and rooms that turned out to be exactly where she needed to be. If the story wanted to make itself neat, it would end here, baby okay. Billionaire humbled, girl saved. But neat is a trick the wealthy sell to people who can't afford the mess. Life is mess. Love is what you do in it. Dawn eased itself along the hospital windows, a wash of pale pink like the inside of a shell. The machines softened their insistence. The nurse with the tired braid poured coffee and said, "She's a fighter," with the kind of warmth that only comes from watching the night blink first. Naya's temperature slipped toward normal by inches, then by more. Noah woke, battered the rabbit's ears against the crib rail, and declared himself in favor of breakfast. Maya fed him with one hand and texted Senora Ruiz with the other. Almost home. Thank you. Kiss Camilla for me. The reply came with a picture of a stubborn 5-year-old in mismatched pajamas, holding a handmade sign that read in wobbly letters, "Brave Mama." Silas stirred, blinking, the blank confusion of a man who hasn't woken up this slow in a decade. He looked at the baby, at the woman, at the rabbit, at the universe, and something like astonishment washed his face clean. He stood, stiff, rolled his neck, then reached for Nia with a gentleness that would have made last week's version of him throw a drink at a mirror. "Hello," he whispered. "I like that you stayed." The doctor rounded at mid-morning, spoke English in short, friendly sentences. "She's good. Monitor 8 more hours. Then home. Home." The word didn't make Maya's stomach clench the way it used to. It unfurled inside her like a flag you can only see when you're high enough to understand the shape of a country. In the quiet times between vitals and bottles, papers were signed that had nothing to do with PR. Silas told Vivienne kindly, directly, that he didn't want to be engaged anymore. She looked at him with wounded outrage. Because of her, she said, chin toward Maya. Because of me, he said, because I thought I needed a marriage that matched a spreadsheet. I need something else. Vivienne's smile shattered in her eyes before it left her mouth. You'll regret this. He didn't. Regret is for things done in fear. He was newly allergic to fear. He called his father. The conversation was short and uninteresting, except for the part where Silas said, calmly, if you ever again pay someone to interfere in my life, I will buy every hotel you still think you own and turn them into housing for single mothers. His father laughed and then realized he wasn't joking. The call ended. He met with Harrow and said, pay Ms. Alvarez what we promised and add hazard pay. Then draw up a separate contract for a consultant position. Harrow's eyebrows performed a soft collapse. Consultant, yes, Silas said, on systems care, operations at scale. Babies are just startups with bigger feelings. He glanced at Maya, the corner of his mouth betraying him into a smile. She knows things we don't. Pay for them. Maya watched all this with the wary astonishment of someone who had been offered gifts before and learned they were traps. I won't be anyone's public project, she said. You won't be, he replied. You'll be my equal where it matters, and my teacher where I'm ignorant. Pay is nice, she said. Stubborn. But what about respect? He held her gaze. I will spend the rest of my life learning that. It sounded like a vow, because it was one. They left the hospital under a sky that had forgiven itself for last night's rage. The city smelled like wet metal and relief. In the car, Noah smacked the rabbit's head against Silas's shoulder with affection. Nia dozed with a pacifier tucked at a smug angle. At the building, the concierge tried to usher them into the private elevator. Silas shook his head. Stairs, he said, and when the man looked startled, he smiled. Good practice. The nursery had transformed. It wasn't whiter or softer. It was warmer. Probably it was only the people in it. Probably that's all warmth ever is. Maya packed the small bags she had arrived with: a shirt, a brush, the saint's coin she wore every day and only took off to bathe. Sunday, she said, because promises matter. I said Sunday. Stay, Silas said. She looked up. He was not the man she had met on a plane, shaking with turbulence and the fear of being needed. He was a man who had walked 68 floors because a baby told him to, and had fired people he'd trusted because a woman told him the truth. He was still rich, still ruthless, still a little bit winter. But there was a thaw. There was a river under the ice. I have to pick up my daughter. She said, she thinks all pigeons are messengers. If I don't go, she'll start hiring geese. He smiled, cracked wide open. Bring her here. Maya's breath caught. Here, not. He gestured helplessly. Not for the cameras, not for a photo of Charity. For dinner. For family. The word rolled out of his mouth new and heavy. I don't know how to make this easy for you. I only know I don't want to do it without you. She studied him. It is not romantic to say that the thing that convinced her wasn't his jawline or his suit or the sad boy angle of his loneliness. It was the way he held Nia like a problem he had finally decided could be solved with patience. It was the way he said family as if it terrified him and he wanted it anyway. Okay, she said, but don't spoil her. She's 5, and she already thinks she runs the United Nations. She does, he said gravely, the pigeons told me. The first dinner was chaos, in the way that makes joy a spilled cup. A rabbit dunked in soup, a toddler negotiation about broccoli that would have impressed Geneva. Silas burned the garlic and laughed at himself, like a man who had just found that laughter was a thing he owned. He showed Camilla how to press the elevator button. She showed him how to twirl in socks. After, when Camilla had fallen asleep in a fort made of expensive throws and a few very patient chairs, Maya stood at the window. The city glittered like a promise. You're finally old enough to hear without bitterness. Silas joined her, hands in his pockets, shoulder brushing hers with the kind of accident that isn't. I should let you go, he said softly, and made no move to step back. You should, she agreed, and didn't. He turned his head, closer. Maya, he said, and her name in his mouth sounded like a prayer. A man says because he believes for the first time that someone might be listening. When he kissed her, it wasn't a billionaire kissing a cleaner or a prince kissing a girl who had lost a shoe. It was two people who had met at the wrong door and decided together to build the right one. It was soft, careful, the way you touch something that has survived a storm and still chooses to bloom. They didn't make promises drunk on heat. They made something better a plan. He would set up a foundation for night care subsidies because the world runs on women no one pays properly. She would consult on family-friendly policies at his companies because empires break when the people holding them up are too tired to stand. He would fix the leak under her sink himself. I own ships, he said, on his knees under her cabinet, shirt rolled to his forearms. How hard can this be? She would teach him lullabies that sound like rivers. Weeks turned into a kind of rhythm that felt like a mercy. The tabloids lost interest when no one performed for them. Vivienne pivoted to a venture capital fund for beauty tech and announced a new romance with a man who wore loafers without socks. Louise tried to sell his version of the story and found that doors don't open for men without keys. The head of security started a small firm upstate guarding warehouses and learned the difference between loyalty and fear. Nia's reflux eased. Noah learned to wave like a senator. Camila made a spreadsheet of the pigeons she liked best and pinned it to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a lemon. Silas read Goodnight Moon with a seriousness that would have moved a boardroom to tears. One Friday, months later, they took a plane west at sunset, not his jet commercial, aisle seat, a diaper bag stuffed with more hope than supplies. Maya held Nia. Silas held Noah, who held the rabbit. Camilla asked the flight attendant if pigeons need passports and was promised research. As the plane rose, the city shrank into a necklace of light. Maya pressed her cheek to the baby's head and closed her eyes. She thought of the first storm, of the wrong door she'd slid under, of the man who had stood like a column and learned how to bend. Silas reached for her hand. His palm was warm. The saint's coin glinted under the cabin lights, their fingers interlaced like a decision that had already been made. I still don't know what I'm doing, he murmured. Good, she said, smiling into the dark. Means you're learning. He turned her hand over and kissed the center of her palm. Tender as any vow. Promise me one thing. What if I forget and try to build a wall again? You'll remind me. She laughed softly. I'll bring a hammer. Outside. The sky opened. Blue on endless blue. No storm in sight. The engines hummed their steady lullaby. Maya breathed in the smell of warm baby and coffee and clean cotton and thought I got on the wrong jet. And then, with a joy she hadn't dared when she was poor and tired and new to the bruised country of grief, no. I got on the right one. Because this time, the man who couldn't let her go had learned what that sentence really means: not possession, but promise; not leverage, but love; not a hand that holds too tightly, but two that build something worth holding together.